us. This is Rex Today with Dominic George on Magic Talk. Market update
with Property Brokers, Farmland's strategic real estate partner.
Indeed, it is time to catch up with the GM of Rural at Property Brokers. His name is Conrad Wilkshire with a market update for us. Conrad, how are you, man?
Yeah, good, Dom. And yourself?
Not too bad. Can't complain. Sunny Dunners, everything's all good. Things are going well.
Nobody's going to listen anyway if we do complain.
Exactly. Well, that's right. Now, you've got a really interesting thing to talk about today because you're talking about record prices continuing for large-scale hill country. So I guess the first question is, how good is it?
It's pretty good. In fact, I've been having a look at a bit of data and for this last 12 months, particularly if we look at large-scale sheep and beef, hill country is in the spotlight a lot for a lot of different reasons. And so I thought I'd just tackle that category of real estate, 200 hectares or more, and it's actually 30% up year on year on its median price. So, it's tracking extremely well. So, if having a look at the median price, we're now talking $10,300 a hectare, and there is no precedent for that, and it's at the larger end of the hill country properties.
Yep, really?
Plus. Yep.
Well, they're good numbers. I mean, look, how far back though are you actually looking on this one?
Well, I've gone back 20 years.
Oh,
because,
really? Okay. Yeah. Deep dive.
Yeah, it is because it's really interesting looking back decade on decade what drives these valuation changes. And there's some fairly interesting things coming forward.
Give us the rundown of what you found.
Well, look, when you look at the 2000s and you look at hill country properties, particularly the quality beef hill country properties that were often referred to as finishing farms, those larger scale farms, particularly sort of 170 hectares plus, and in this category we're looking at 200 hectares plus, but in those larger farms, sheep farms, those are the ones that were being targeted for dairy conversion. And there was about 1 million hectares of beef country that went to dairy over the 2000s, right up to pre-GFC levels. And so you actually had a median price, and I think this is probably not that well understood, but in those larger hill country, well, I'd say finishing downlands type country properties, you had paying up to about 8,100 a hectare as a median price back in the 2008 mark.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the pre-GFC, and the market was really strong, and that was all driven off the demand to dairy. And what's interesting about that is that with the GFC and the credit crunch and some of the environmental changes coming to the dairy, that dairy conversion market all but changed overnight. And so post-GFC, and if you look at 2009, 2010, those median prices halved.
Wow.
So we've gone from, if you like, the last decade, it's like night and day. It's gone from about 4,000 a hectare median price up to where we are today at 10,300 a hectare in that larger, and it's actually a different category of land rather than this time the value is being driven off, if you like, the top end of the sheep and beef market, pastoral market. It's probably on the more extensive farms, which still actually very productive farms, but that end of the market has had a huge lift. There's I think, no such thing as cheap land anywhere in rural New Zealand these days. And we're seeing a hell of a trend there, and that trend continues. In fact, we think it's going to continue going forward from here too.
That's really interesting. So obviously it was the dairy conversion pre sort of 2008, 2009. So yeah. What do we put it down to now? What's the resurgence down to now, do you think?
Combination of, because it hasn't all been forestry through this recovery period. The underlying returns for our sheep and beef sector have been favourable. They didn't have the same debt burden as the dairy sector to absorb in the post-GFC environment. And the underlying returns, admittedly wool has been hard work, but if you actually have a look at the underlying returns, sheep and beef farming has been in a good place. And then it has accelerated in these last 2 or 3 years. So you've gone from a median price, if you go back 2017 mark, it would be about 8,000 a hectare. It's now 10,300 a hectare and increasing. There's plenty, remember that's the median price, so there's definitely big unders and overs from there. So, that's definitely tracking up. So the forestry sales, we take the 50,000 hectares that we've sold, in the last 12 months, forestry land sold to forestry interests would be less than 10,000 hectares of that.
Right.
So there's a hell of a lot of sheep and beef country being sold as sheep and beef country, I think.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Lose sight of that.
Yeah, because that would be the thing that people listening would be going, okay, well, yeah, but how much of that has gone to forestry? So that's it there. So out of, just reiterate those numbers, out of a total of X amount, how much has gone to forestry?
Well, out of the 50,000 hectares of real estate we've been involved with the last 12 months, less than 10,000 hectares would have gone to forestry.
Right. Okay, so there's the numbers, people, as it pertains to the team at Property Brokers. Very interesting. So, and you say that this is going to be something that you see continuing? Well,
I will say in the last 12 months that forestry interest continues to accelerate.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And so if the current policy settings stay in place, and there's a lot of question marks around that, but if they were to stay in place, we would see continued pricing pressure coming from, land use change. Our hope is that moderates and is, right tree, right place. That makes a lot of sense. But, permanent forests in an area that could never be used for forestry, that probably makes less sense. And so we think those policy changes will flow through over the next 12 months. That's our view, and it's the view of many in the market as well. But ultimately, we don't see the value appreciation in rural land falling away because the underlying returns are there. And if you were to look at the data decade on decade and you were to hold your property, if you've got an intergenerational view of your farm, now the trend's the friend. Ultimately, there's less land available. There's a real requirement for food production, and we have a competitive advantage in growing, high quality, sustainable food. So, and no less so than our New Zealand lamb production and beef production. So, our fundamental view is that the prices will hold. You just might not have quite the same liquidity in the market that we've got at the moment, where you've got multiple interests bidding on land, and it's more than just forestry. I might add too. When you think about alternative land use, you might want to think about farms being sold to windmills, solar. These are all things that we're starting to see as being present in the market, and some in regions that people might not have thought.
Well, it's very interesting insight, Conrad, as always. I really do appreciate you coming on and giving us those thoughts on this particular topic. There you go, hill country people. Large-scale hill country farms. It's certainly looking at record prices at the moment. Conrad Wilkshire from Property Brokers, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tom, as always.
Market Update
with Property Brokers, Farmland's strategic real estate partner.